What does biblical justice look like? We're going to talk about that and other things here on Wake Up to the Bible. I'm Daniel Kaplan. I'm here with my father, Dr. Kaplan. Together, reading through the books of the law, Genesis through Deuteronomy over the course of this year. Today, we're reading Exodus 22:27 through Exodus 23:5, and I'll be reading from the Robert Alter translation. You shall not vilify God, nor shall you curse a thief among your people. The first yield of your vats and the first yield...
A chief, not a thief, right?
Oh, sorry, chief, sorry.
Yeah.
Nor shall you curse a chief among your people.
Right,
Sorry.
right.
The first yield of your vats and the first yield of your grain you shall not delay to give. The firstborn of your sons you shall give to me. Thus shall you do with your ox and your sheep. 7 days it shall be with its mother. On the 8th day you shall give it to me. And consecrated men you shall be to me. Flesh in the field torn by beasts you shall not eat. To the dog you shall fling it. You shall not bear a false rumor. You shall not put your hand with the guilty to be a harmful witness. You shall not follow the many for evil. And you shall not bear witness in a dispute to go askew it in support of the many. Nor a poor man should you favor in his dispute. Should you encounter your enemy's ox or his donkey straying, you must surely return it to him. Should you see your adversary's donkey sprawling under its load and would hold back from assisting him, you shall surely assist him. All right. So lots of some interesting things here. This is like I said, it's really getting at the core of what biblical justice looks like, in my opinion, this little section. But we can kind of go through it bit by bit. This is the interesting part is the beginning, where it says, "You shall not vilify God, nor shall you curse a chief among your people." What do you think that's actually getting at? Like, what does that mean to vilify God, and why does it connect to cursing a chief? Kind of an
blasphemy, and we have to have a certain respect for authority. God, in effect, stands behind the authority.
Mm-hmm. So you think that's why it's connecting the two things?
Connecting the two.
It's connecting the two things because by saying, well, what's so great about this person or something is a way to.
Well, I think it goes to really saying something really vicious. I don't think it goes to criticism.
No. I understand that. I got you. You're right.
Yeah.
To some degree, I wonder if this is because if you look at the consequences of all this is talking about in terms of like I said, this sort of this justice of the society, it's almost like you shouldn't vilify God or shall you curse a chief, because later it'll say you don't show favor to the poor, right? It's kind of like don't vilify God by saying that the person who has a lot is necessarily evil, and then later it'll say don't assume that the person who doesn't have anything is necessarily good. This is something that tends to happen.
That's a good point. Yeah,
right?
That's a good point.
And it's essentially you're kind of vilifying God in a sense, because isn't he ultimately somewhat responsible for the fact that somebody has a lot of blessings in a sense? In a sense.
Could say that.
Well, I mean, I'm trying to figure out how this is connecting the two things. But when it says a chief, it's referring to like elders, right?
Yeah, here it says ruler in my...
Yeah, so that could be, that's not necessarily somebody that's a spiritual person, right?
Well, I know Jesus applied it to the high...
yeah.
It was a Jesus or
Is
Paul.
it kind of like a Romans 13 sort of thing?
Well, no, remember...
Is it Romans 13?
I think was it Paul... Paul who made a comment, and they said, "How dare you say that to the high priest?" He said, "Oh, I didn't know that was the high priest."
Right.
And then he quoted this verse, I believe.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember, but anyway, it's in the New Testament.
Right.
But so in other words, there's a way of dealing with authority figures that where you don't undermine the office. You have respect for the office.
Interesting. Okay. Which is complicated because obviously you have the concept of testing false prophets and stuff, and they'll have quite a following. And then later we have here, you don't have to listen to the popular opinion. So it's a lot of nuance.
And also you have Jesus referring to, I believe it was Herod Archelaus as a fox. I think he called him a fox, which is, I don't think he meant it in a complimentary way.
Right.
So, I mean, I think there's a balance here.
Uh-huh.
It has to do with, I think, really being very vicious, malicious in your speech.
Well, if you think,
and also in a public way too,
right,
where people around are hearing it and so on.
Well, there's a difference too in your intention, right? Because certainly there's criticism for this for deconstruction, and there's criticism for construction, right?
Right.
So if you're criticizing in order to try to influence somebody to be better or for society to
Right,
be better, that's
right.
very different than just criticizing so that you can just beat up on something.
And Romans 13 points out, as does also the Pirkei Avot in the Jewish tradition, the ethics of the fathers, that if not for government, we would be in a jungle.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, most governments are oppressive over history.
right.
Unfortunately,
But still
but
would be better than
but
the
if
alternative.
you
Yeah,
didn't have them,
yeah.
it would
It's like the
you know
Leviathan concept, if you're familiar
yeah
with that. In
Hobbes. You talking about Hobbes or
Yeah,
uh,
yeah. All right, so we have all this about firstborn and first fruits and all
there'll
of
be
this.
more about that later.
Yeah, we'll have more about that later, so just hold on to that. Don't eat food that was torn up by bees. Give it to your dog. What?
We are not cruel to animals. You let the mother nurse the child for the offspring for a week,
Yeah.
and then you can take it. But let it be with its mother for 7 days. I think that's also a matter of not being cruel to animals.
Hmm. Yeah, makes sense. But it does show a difference too in terms of animals of that you can't eat this food, but the dog can. And there's something to keep
Yeah,
in mind.
yeah,
Um,
right,
I mean, that might seem obvious, but
yeah,
there's a
right,
different standard, right?
right.
Something that would be immoral for you to do is not immoral for an animal to do on this level, even if it's you doing it, right? Because it's one thing, it's like animals do what animals do. This is specifically you giving the animal something that you would not give yourself.
But it gets much more exciting later,
Uh-oh.
where you don't do it, but you can give it to a Gentile.
I know. We'll talk
So
about
we'll get to
that.
that
Just
later.
wait.
Yeah, we'll
Okay.
get to that later.
All right. You shall not bear a false. Okay. This is where I feel like this is quite applicable to what is going on today. This section where it's talking about you shall not bear a false rumor. You shall not put your hand with the guilty to bear harmful witness. You shall not follow the many for evil. This is a problem because rumors do spread and they're usually popular, right? And people can get sucked into them. And we all know it, social media and things like that. And a lot of people can fall prey to this. And this is a horrible thing to do. You do not have the right to rob somebody justice or a fair analysis of themselves
Reputation.
by false accusations. And this matters no matter who they are. There's no limitation on this. It says you shall not bear false rumors. So if even if your intentions are good in terms of you think that person needs to be taken down a peg because they are not on the right side, they're not moral, whatever it is, that still doesn't mean that facts don't matter, that the truth does not matter. Because often what will happen is they're like, well, maybe they didn't do that exactly. But that's the kind of thing they would do. No, that matters,
Yeah,
right? Or, well, they didn't do that exactly, but why are you defending them? No, it matters. It matters. The specifics matter.
yeah,
That's what it says here.
yeah.
Do not bear false witness. It's blanket. Do not do it. So if you don't know, if you don't have a primary evidence of it, you've got to be very careful because if you, let's say somebody says, this public figure did X, you do not know that and you report it, you could be in violation of this because it might be a false rumor. And the problem right now we're having is that so many people, I mean, this has always been a problem, but the problem that societies have is that people are motivated to make up false stories. People are motivated to believe the false stories about people they don't like, and they spread them. And people you can quote unquote trust to care about their reputation will report false rumors all the time. Which means you're misapplying your trust. But I think the point is you shouldn't have that much trust in people.
I think
You should be more skeptical.
a lot of
You should
me,
always ask for the evidence.
it's a lot of media that are not going to hire my son now. I'm glad he's got a way to make a
Well,
living.
and I don't want to sound like I'm just bashing one side of a
No,
political
no,
aisle or one
no,
sort of.
no, he's not
This
being
is
political.
all over
It's a
the
moral
place. It
principle.
is a moral principle
Right,
that always applies. I
right,
don't care
yeah,
who it is.
yeah, right.
And it's not like I've never violated it because unfortunately, sometimes I've gotten sucked in and I've repeated information that turned out
Well,
to be
but
false.
you're not going on the air or publishing leaflets or whatever.
I cannot.
Maybe you
No,
say
no,
it to
no.
a
I
few
can't
friends.
guarantee that on Facebook I've never reported something that is inaccurate because
Right.
unfortunately sometimes you trust somebody, you trust a source, and then you say, wow, I can't believe this happened, and then it turns out the source was lying. And so you've got to be careful. And I see this all the time now because
Okay.
the rate of information spreading is really fast right now. So you've got to
Okay.
be careful. I
Right.
can name you 20 religious leaders within the movement, or whatever you want to say, within pronomianism, that are guilty of this verse right off
Right.
the top of my head. And
Well,
if you're listening, I'm talking to you. Be careful.
that doesn't speak well for the movement.
It does not. It was, but I'm not. But here's my point. My point, and I'm not trying to spread a false rumor that they're worse than everybody else either. My point is, or that it's just, it's the end of the world, it's the worst thing ever. My point is that we need to be careful because it
Right.
is not. This is not a principle that is being very elevated by society. We're especially right now. We're very much in a the ends justify the means. This is a war. Let's just go for it, and the details don't matter and
Right.
things like that. And yes, they do.
Right.
You
Right.
don't. So
Right.
that's a little rant, but it's important, and especially because of how it ties it in. You shall not follow the many for evil. Be careful. The majority is often wrong. The majority often does not have good intentions. They just want to get the other side, and this doesn't matter what side you're on. Because again, if you get into that war mentality, you do kind of have an evil intention because your goal is not to find the truth. Your goal is to demolish the other side. You
So,
know.
and some people will then reconsider, like the crowd said, "Crucify him," and then 7 weeks later, a lot of them repented.
Yeah,
But I mean,
I know. Yeah,
there can be
imagine.
a temporary.
Right.
The majority can be temporarily in favor of something, and later on they back away.
Yeah.
You know.
Right. So be
Yeah.
very careful.
Yeah.
And then we keep going. A poor man you should not favor in his dispute. This is the thing, right? We often will be biased towards the vulnerable, and that's not necessarily factually true. Vulnerable people can do wicked things, of course.
Right. Yeah.
Just the fact that they don't have as much power within society doesn't make them more moral by default. But you can see here in the Bible, this is a concern, right? And this has been a concern for forever. This is not a new
Right.
idea.
Right.
This is something that goes back there because it makes sense. You're
Mhm.
compassionate, right? You're like, well, they were down and out. Shouldn't we give them a pass? It's like morality is morality. Like we've got to be consistent, and you can empathize. You can understand why somebody does immoral things, but on the other hand, you have to be consistent. Otherwise, your society's going to break apart.
Yeah, now later on, we see what like the people who do have can resort to bribery, which is wrong.
Right.
You'll see that in a little while.
Right. And
Mhm.
here's the other thing too, if you encounter your enemy's ox or his donkey straying, you must surely return to him. Should you see your adversary's donkey sprawling under its load and would hold back from assisting him, you shall surely assist him. See, this is the thing, right? When and this is even further than not spreading a false rumor about your enemy, right? This is not only that, but you're expected to actually somewhat help your enemy, if you see that they're struggling. So we have to be very careful because it's the popular thing right now on social media to just dunk on people, and that's not the point.
The,
That's not the point.
the Jewish tradition is that the second temple was destroyed because of sinat chinam, groundless hatred.
Yeah. Well, Jesus says groundless hatred is murder, basically.
Oh,
You
I
know,
see.
you know what he says,
Yeah, yeah,
whoever
yeah.
angry without
Right,
cause is
right,
murder.
right. Yeah,
And I think that's fair,
right,
right? Because you're what you do is you dehumanize somebody, and when
right,
you
right.
and that's what he gets in that thing. He's like, whoever says empty one is that you're dehumanizing them. You're
Yeah,
almost robbing them of a human life in a sense.
yeah.
Your intent is to not think of them as a human being. Once you get to the point where you're not thinking of somebody as a human being, you are very close to murder. I mean, people can say that, right? It's the steps of genocide, right? And dehumanization is high
It
up there.
might have again been Dennis Prager, but somebody recently talked about stealing in the sense of stealing one's reputation.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's very
yeah,
important. Like
yeah.
these are all very important. So, I mean,
Right.
we have to be very careful. We have to be very careful with details. And the fact that we're talking about somebody who is on the wrong side does not matter. And we have to be, when it says enemy, I don't think it's implying that it's not somebody they should view as an enemy. It's just saying they're an enemy, right? And they do have enemies. But the point is that even to your enemies, you don't
Yeah,
treat them in that way.
yeah. Well,
You don't just unfairly
right,
ostracize them because of their being an
right.
enemy.
Yeah, right.
You know. it's quite mm, it's quite a bit stronger than I think people think. I think people really get a wrong, warped view of the law in the Hebrew writings. I think they think it's just some mercenary thing, and we didn't learn how to love each other until Jesus came down and told us all this, and that's not true. It's clearly there's clearly nuance, there's clearly balance in all of these things, all throughout. So and that's a broad statement, but I'm just saying, you get that kind of thing. You get that kind of bifurcation of the Bible where you got like the mean tough side and the nice side, and you know it's not that way. It's very compassionate throughout, and very a lot of empathy and moral principles that have to be applied to everybody, which makes for a fairness to it. Anyway.
These people maybe haven't read Matthew 23 or Revelation 19
No, I understand. Yeah,
uh,
I gotcha.
all
No,
right,
no, I
moving
understand.
right along.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, so anyway, let's be very careful about what we talk about, publicly. And certainly both me and my dad are very diligent about, try to be very diligent about this. And we have pulled material because it's been inaccurate. We have, done corrections, and we'll continue to do so. So if you ever hear us say anything and you say, wow, that's really out of line, please let us know, because we will want to correct it, and we will
Right.
publicly acknowledge such. And I think any teacher should. And if a teacher you watch doesn't, be careful.
Yeah. Okay. Amen.